Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to make a presentation. I was asked to make a presentation on food consumption and supply in India. So this work is being done with my mentor, Dr. Praduman Kumar. And this presentation has been given at several forums. I think my Indian friends will agree with me that it was presented at 2-3 forums. Okay, where is that one? Yeah, this one? This one, huh? Yeah. So giving little background, there is a paradox in Indian growth trajectory. We have two India. One is on a brighter side we have a rich India, and on the other extreme we have a very poor India. You are aware that India is emerging a very a rising economy. Among large economies, India is performing very well. The economic growth is very high. Despite several odds this year, India is achieving more than 7% growth rate. Incomes, per capita incomes of all category of groups, all income groups is rising. Yet India is home of the largest number of poor and undernourished population is living in India. As per the Global Hunger Index, which IFPRI is constituting every year and releasing, India ranks 97 out of 118 countries. So this is a really starking situation that we need to address. Though all the governments, successive governments which are ruling country, they have various kinds of programs to improve food security and take out people out of poverty, either through various kinds of social safety net programs or empowering people through improving their income. So I will be briefly, I am giving four areas I am covering, how the food consumption is changing among rich people, poor people, and those who are living in rural and urban areas, and what are the main sources of nutrients among these group of people, population. Second, we have also tried to do how diet is diversifying and what are the drivers of the dietary diversification. And third is how India is going to perform with respect to demand and supply by 2020 and 2030. Here I am giving results only 2030 because of limited time. And lastly, we will see that how will India be deficit or surplus in key food commodities by 2020 and 2030. So these are the four areas which I am covering. So first I will give, before going to results, I will just briefly give the approach which we have used. We have used National Sample Survey Organization data, which is various rounds are being, various rounds of the National Sample Survey Organizations are collected. This one we have, latest round is available for 2011 and 12. So we have used, here I am showing 1980, 384 and comparing with latest round. In between we have that information. We have estimated direct household demand, the human consumption directly, and then added indirect demand, which includes the seed, feed and wastage. Also the industrial use is increasing very rapidly. We have also tried to estimate the home away food demand for estimating the demand, the overall demand for the country. So what we have done, we have estimated disaggregated expenditure elasticities and demand for 22 commodities for 35 states in India. We have also used, did this analysis for rural and urban population. We have also did this for poor income strata, middle and high income strata. And we used fixed food characteristic demand system model. And we have used three scenarios here. One is the business as usual, the current GDP growth. And second is if the growth rate is falling by 25% and if growth is increasing by 25%, just to see the variation or range of demand for food commodities. The second is on supply side. We estimated translog cost functions where we have used to estimate the factory elasticities for projecting the supply. We have estimated derived input demands, and then through that we estimated supply from the cost function. And the supply was projected for three scenarios. One is the baseline scenario, And second is that the baseline plus if the total factor productivity is increasing the 50% of what is at existing rate, it is around 1.3%. And the total factor productivity, if it is declining by by that level. So again, giving a range of minimum and maximum and business as usual. So coming to the first aspect, the changing consumption pattern and dietary diversity and projections for 2030. So this one gives that Indian consumer, one is that morning Tom was referring that Indian consumer is almost spending half of the total expenditure on food. So half of the total expenditure is going for food. But if you look to the poor people and the people living in rural area, this is more than 60%. So here one can see that the cereals are the major where food expenditure is being made. But over the years, there is a dramatic decline in the expenditure in cereals. But still, it is a dominant source of food expenditure. The second observation is that the pulses and the sugar, pulses and sugar, there is little decline in the expenditure share. But on the contrary, the other food crops like fruits, meat, edible oil, vegetable, milk, so their expenditure share in the total food expenditure has increased. So their expenditure has increased from roughly from 42% to more than 65%. So the group we are always characterizing as high value commodities, fruits, meat, milk, fish, eggs. So their consumption expenditure is increasing. Here, edible oil is also included. So the share of these commodities is increasing at a very, very fast rate. Now this is the changing dietary pattern. The last column, 2 columns are showing all India, where we have 1983 year and 2011. If you look to this one, the per capita consumption of rice, per capita consumption of rice and wheat and coarse cereals is declining over the years. If you look the total cereals, the decline is much, much faster and mainly due to the coarse cereals. The coarse cereal consumption, the human consumption is declining at a much faster rate, but the coarse cereal consumption is increasing in as feed or industrial uses. Pulses, it is declining. Per capita consumption is declining mainly due to non-availability of pulses and also rise in the prices. Pulses are the main source of nutrition in India because most of the consumption for meat, fish, and is not that high as we have in China and other countries. But if you look other commodities, the high value group we are saying vegetables, fruit, milk, sugar, and the meat, fish, and egg. This is meat, fish, and egg. The per capita consumption is increasing much, much faster. But if you look to the meat, fish, and egg, the consumption, per capita consumption is very low compared to China and many Southeast Asian countries. So you can see that here, huge scope is there. But milk consumption has increased very dramatically. The trends are almost same in rural India and the urban India. The same trend, but only the intensity is varying. The rural India is consuming lesser than the urban India, with the exception of rice. Poor people are consuming more of rice than the urban consumers are going for rice. Now this was basically because one is under public distribution system, the rice and wheat, these are the 2 commodities which are being given, and also the preferences, and then for coarse cereals, more is going for the for feed and dairy, poultry sector, and also for the dairy sector. This one is as per the income group. Poor income group, middle income group, and the higher income group. If you look to, the trends are almost same as it was in rural and urban. The consumption of cereals is declining and high value commodities is increasing. Only difference here is that the poor consumers, poor consumers are eating, their consumption is, their consumption for rice is increasing. The consumption for poor people is the rice consumption is increasing, and remaining the trends are almost same. Now we computed the dietary diversity. Dietary diversity was, we have computed the Simpson index for dietary diversity for different groups and during two time periods, 1983 and 2011. What we observe that dietary diversity is increasing among all the income groups, and the dietary diversity, as income increases, the diversity is also more. And also we observe that when there's a diversity, food is being diverted, more diversity is there, it is going for the nutritive foods. The main drivers for dietary diversity were income. As income increases, as I mentioned, the more diversity. Lifestyle, rural and urban areas, it is the diversity is more. And also the infrastructure like roads, markets, and other infrastructure. But if the family size increases, then the dietary diversity is less in areas. One important thing is that the diversity among farming community is more as compared to the non-farming communities, and the farmers are consuming more of calories, protein, and other nutrients. So we have also calculated the food demand elasticities and projected for 2030 the per capita demand for different commodities. These are the income elasticities and price elasticities. You can see that the price elasticities are much higher than the income elasticities for all the commodities. The elasticities were more for high value commodities, whether it is income elasticity or price elasticity, as compared to the cereals, especially rice, wheat, and core cereals. But the consumers are more sensitive to the prices compared to the income. And if you can see that the meat, fish, and egg, the income elasticity and the price elasticity are very, very high. So these have implications for future policies. We also estimated the per capita demand for 2030. Here, per capita demand for rice, there may be little fall in the demand for rice, overall demand, per capita demand. But for other commodities, it will go up. Core cereal is also revealing same thing. Pulses demand will go up. For other commodities, high value commodities, all you can see the percentage change is much higher compared to the wheat and pulses. So this is the total demand. This includes human consumption, feed, seed, feed, and also for industrial uses. India will need by 2030 around 310 million tons of food grains, and the growth will be during 2010 and 2020. It will grow by 1.5% per year, and for 2030 it will be by 1.25. So we have to increase our production at that level. For high value commodities, the demand will increase substantially. You can see that the change is very high. The demand growth rates are more than 2% for vegetables, fruits, and milk. But if you look to fish, meat, and poultry, it will grow by more than 3%. So this area has significant prospects for future demand for food. Yeah. Then we have done for supply elasticities and projected for demand for and supply gap by 2030. So here these are the supply responses and input prices. This is input prices: wages, bullock, machine, and capital, and the irrigation. You can see that almost all these are inelastic and near zero. All the input elasticities are either negative or almost zero. But output price elasticities are very high. The producers are very sensitive to the prices. So these have implications on the domestic prices of different commodities. So these are the growth rates of the factors which we have used in the model. The human labor and animal power, there is a negative growth rate. They will be replaced by the farm mechanization. So rice, there may be more and more farm mechanization because the wages are increasing, and rice is a labor-intensive commodity. Pulses also may attract a lot of farm mechanization, and the fertilizer is almost, for pulses we have more use of fertilizer. Oilseed, we may have more use of fertilizer. Irrigation, rice, pulses and oilseed, they have huge potential to increase because most large area under rice is rain-fed, pulses are rain-fed, oilseeds are rain-fed. So here, huge potential for increasing production through increasing area under irrigation. So here are the supply side under three scenario. One is the business as usual, and the high total factor productivity and low total factor productivity under three different scenario. The two observations are here. Coarse cereal, pulses, total factor productivity will play a very, very important role in increasing supply. Coarse cereals, pulses, edible oil and sugar, they do not have potential to increase total factor productivity. So under different scenario, the supply is not changing much. But in case of rice, there is enough scope of increasing total factor productivity. Wheat, there is huge potential to increase total factor productivity. So these have implications to invest more on pulses, edible oil, if we have to meet the future demand of these commodities. This column is giving demand under two scenarios I have listed here. They are given just range. There are three messages are emerging from this one, that India may be surplus in wheat and coarse cereals, huge surplus of wheat and coarse cereal. Sugar and rice, there may be, it depends upon how the total factor productivity will shape in future. If total factor productivity is coming as what we have anticipated, then we will be surplus in rice. Or the potential area like Eastern India, which we say Eastern Indo-Gangetic Plain, and where the government is giving huge priority for increasing production. If that comes true, then India will be surplus. If this does not, then India might have be deficit in rice. Pulses will be deficit. Will be deficit in pulses, and will be deficit in edible oil. But if you look to the high value commodities, we have done the supply under two scenarios. One is if we can manage post-harvest, these are all perishable commodities. All commodities are perishable. So the post-harvest losses are there, ranging between 20 to 40% are the post-harvest losses. If we can manage post-harvest losses, then there is one scenario. If we can't manage post-harvest losses, the red ones are the scenario. So if supply will be 210 million tons of vegetable, if we are able to manage post-harvest losses, if not, then we'll have 160 million tons. Under this situation, if we can manage the post-harvest losses, India will be surplus in high-value commodities. It can export these commodities. But if we are not able to manage post-harvest losses, then India will be deficit in vegetables, fruits, milk, eggs, meat, eggs and fish. We will always be surplus in. We have also done an analysis last year when India was reeling under a severe drought, and 2 consecutive year drought were there. So we are not saying that this is impact of climate change, but this is the impact of climate variability. The drought is affecting in different ways. One is that if there is no timely rainfall, we have done it for rainy season crops. If there is no timely rainfall, then acreage is being affected. If there is a rainfall is not there during the crop season, then yield is affected, and overall supply is affected. Supply is affecting the prices will go up, and then eventually it will affect the demand for different commodities. So here we have shown only for rice and wheat, the 10% drought intensity will have, the prices will increase by 12%. And in case of maize, it is around 15%. So these are the elasticities for rice and maize, and we try to project, under this scenario we projected that if by 2020, if we have 20% deficit rainfall, then India may have to import around, will be deficit of 15 million tons if government wants to maintain the same prices and same consumption level. In that case, if prices are allowed to increase, the deficit may be lesser. And in case of maize, there will be again less production of the commodity. These have implications for not only for Indian situation, but for the global prices also. Yeah. So finally, we have 6 broad issues which we have discussed here. One is that Indian consumption basket is diversifying, and it is moving towards high-value commodities away from cereals. Dietary diversification is taking place more among rich people compared to the poor people, and more urban people are also diversifying. And when diversification is taking place, dietary diversification is taking place, the nutritional outcomes are getting better. India may be surplus in wheat and coarse cereals, but deficit in pulses and edible oil. And depends upon the post-harvest management, the high-value commodities will take the shape. What kind of policy interventions are needed for future? One, that area expansion is unlikely. The area has already reached to that level. It is diverted to other alternative uses. So need for total factor productivity growth through technological interventions. Pulses need serious attention because India is the largest producer and consumer of pulses. We do not have enough pulses at the global level. So we cannot have the trade on pulses. Then we need to see that how we evolve medium and long-term trade policy for both for surplus commodities as well as for deficit commodities. And we need to give greater focus on high-value commodities, especially with respect to the post-harvest losses. Here comes the role of the agri-business, especially in the back end, also in the front end, post-harvest, like we need more of the cold chains, cold storage, agro-processing. So here, the more incentives are needed for the private sector through effective policies. Then also more investment in agriculture, especially agriculture R&D needs more attention for improving the total factor productivity of key commodities. And we need to give high priority for pulses and post-harvest management of the high-value commodities. So thank you very much for your patience listening. I think that the right domestic and trade policies along with adequate institutional arrangement will meet India's future demand. So this is Indian food basket, food thali, which covers fully nutritive and this is Rajasthani thali. So thank you very much.